Okay, well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We appreciate you spending the next hour with us. My name is Amanda, and I will be your host. So please contact me with any assistance you need or questions you have by typing into the chat box or by sending an email to support@KIT.org. And the slide note handout for today's webinar is available in our Online Learning Center in the Launch tab under Watch Webinar for this corresponding session. And today's webinar is on coaching a pyramid model and effective practices. And your presenter today is Janet George. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Janet.
Thank you, Amanda, and thanks to each of you who are here. Just for your information, those of you who are in Heather's cohort, she is on a site visit today, so I'm going to fly solo, but she will certainly be in touch with you after the webinar. Make sure that your form is ready to roll, and she'll also send out the email for consultation calls. Today, our learning objectives are to match the definition to the correct level of support in a coaching pyramid model, and based on a scenario, select the best approach to developing a collaborative agreement with staff. And third, describe the criteria you will use to determine if goals in an action plan have been achieved. In the AIM module, we talked about coaching as a relationship-based process that's designed to build capacity for specific professional attributes, skills, and conduct. As a coach, you'll facilitate the process to build staff knowledge, skills, and abilities to support children and youth. So let's see what that's going to look like using the coaching pyramid model. We'll review relationship first. Coaching should improve your mentees' belief in themselves and their ability to use inclusive practices to meet group and individual needs. And it's essential that as a coach you're aware of the level of confidence in the mentee and what their fears might be in relation to the new learning opportunities and challenges. Challenges that seem too great can lead to resistance. For coaching to be successful, the coaching relationship must be safe, confidential, and used to foster learning and growth versus being used to evaluate performance for review purposes. Additionally, it's important for the coach to show respect to the mentee and to engage in problem solving with them versus trying to give them all the answers or solving the problems for them. And I think sometimes some of us just jump right into that. Problem solving is kind of our thing, and so we assess really quickly what's going on and try to offer our feedback back on what to do before we give them an opportunity to contribute. So that's part of what we'll talk about today. Also, as we talked about in the E module, the collaborative agreement is to determine what the goals are and then to create an action plan to improve your staff's knowledge, skills, and abilities. And it's really important for them to contribute to this process. You should find out what they know and find out what they want to learn more about. And your mentees will appreciate feeling valued for their prior learning and what they are currently contributing. And by being actively involved in creating the plan and coming to an agreement of what the roles and responsibilities are, they're more likely to have a sense of ownership in that process. So remember, it's important to emphasize the application of knowledge to practice as you develop that plan. Coaches need to be good at explaining themselves and ensuring that a transfer of knowledge and understanding to the mentees. So that transfer of knowledge and skill development can be done through modeling, observation, feedback, and reflection. This is similar to the process you learned about in session 3, where instead of focusing on a support plan for the child, then you're going to create an action plan for the teacher. You should be really familiar with the pyramid by now. We use it for everything, I think. We're looking at this as a way to support children and youth, and we're introducing it as a model for coaching in the E module. we're going to talk about how you can use it as a framework for coaching. Instead of applying the levels to specific classroom practices, we're going to apply the levels to coaching practices. And the foundational level is still relationships. It's relationships between you and your mentee. And I absolutely cannot emphasize enough how important this foundational level is in determining what the outcomes of your action plan will be and helping the mentees develop new skills. At this level, you can explore what their attitudes and experiences are related to inclusion. And if you think all the way back to session 1 and the guiding principles of inclusion, where are they in that? Like, inclusion is a way of thinking. All children and youth have the right to meaningfully participate. Behavior as communication reflects how children take in their environment, and positive relationships are the foundation for successful inclusion. And in the forum, I still see people pulling from these guiding principles, and that's incredibly fulfilling for me to actually see that there's carryover from session 1. But so thinking about those as part of this foundational level as you're building relationships, where are staff in their beliefs about inclusion? The environmental level is about creating a supportive environment so staff have confidence and competence to put strategies in practice. And it's also important to think about families and help them feel comfortable sharing and receiving information. So support can come in a lot of different ways. Coaching and mentoring are your teaching practices, and this helps staff when they're unsure about how to use a strategy or feel stuck. The targeted level relates to staff's knowledge, skills, and abilities related to developmentally appropriate practices. And then the intensive level refers to how well the mentee is able to devise and implement specific accommodations to meet children or youth's needs. So remember, foundational level is the relationship between you and your mentee. So active listening involves making a conscious effort to hear what the mentee is saying and trying to understand their complete message. So this involves intentionally paying attention and showing that you're listening, doing the nodding and the facial expressions, your posture and all of that, and really focusing on that and being in the moment. And then providing feedback or reflecting on what you heard them say. It's also important during this process to defer your judgment. So we have to allow them to finish what they're talking about, what they're sharing with us, before we ask questions. And we don't want to interrupt them. And we also don't want to counter them with arguments. So it's not one of those moments where say, well, I hear you, but this isn't the time for that. We can respond appropriately and be candid and honest in the responses, but we have to make sure that they feel like they've been heard. And we're going to assert our opinions respectfully and treat them with respect during this active listening process. Acknowledgement is also important as part of building the relationship. We need to meet people where they are and give them credit for what they're doing and also for what they know. It's basically using a strength-based approach with your mentee. So we have to take time to validate their feelings. And sometimes we might have to say something like, I know this is hard, and you're frustrated about whatever it is. Like an example might be not having a set teaching team. That's really hard. Or maybe another one is, I know it's hard, and you feel like Miss Amanda is not as helpful as she should be. And so we reflect that back to them and acknowledge what's happening before we move over. And another one, I think another area often is the family. So it might be a statement like, I know you feel angry about how the family's handling this right now, but what can we do that is best for the child in our program? And so you acknowledge that, yeah, it's hard because the family's not on board, but it doesn't take our power away. What can we do? So it's that acknowledgement of their efforts and emotions. And then we move on to follow through, which is also really important as you're setting up this relationship you guys are busy. You are busy, but it's so important to keep scheduled coaching appointments and to schedule feedback sessions in a timely manner. So your observations for the coaching piece, they don't have to be long. It's important to target a time of the day when staff are going to use the strategy. So remember back to the action activity where you had to look for a strategy to see if it was being used. So it's kind of the same principle here. You're going to schedule time to observe strategies being used, to set up the coaching opportunities, and come into the classroom like 10 to 15 minutes prior to when they're going to use it, and then offer modeling or observe them implementing the strategies, and then you exit the room. And it's often important for you to work with the management team to make sure you have coverage while you're in a coaching session. Who's going to cover for you during an observation and then at some point during a feedback session if something comes up that ordinarily you would respond to? So let's say, for instance, you're in room B and there are some persistent challenges with the child in room K. If there's a call for support in room K while you're in a targeted coaching session with room B and ordinarily you would respond, who's going to respond instead? Because anybody on the management team and even some of your leads can respond to behavior support in a classroom. You might be the right person to do the follow-up later, but it's important that you don't leave a targeted coaching session to do that room support. We're talking about 30 minutes or something, so it's important to have those conversations with management and get on the schedule, say, I'm going to be in this room at this time. If there's a call for support in another classroom, who during this time will be available to support so that everybody's on board and you don't lose that support that's so important for the other classroom. Part of the process is also about creating an environment that's conducive to and supports coaching. So you have to be really thoughtful about enabling the conditions and the context that will maximize your efforts and your mentees' capacity for meeting their goals. So here's some things to consider. Learning must be valued, and we demonstrate that by recognizing and following adult learning principles, and which we've introduced throughout this course. So examples include making sure that adult learners are active, involved in the process, that they make decisions relevant to their learning needs, and also that you encourage them to connect their current learning with their past knowledge and experiences. And we've talked a lot about setting goals with learners and also about the importance of using coaching strategies that are relevant and will help learners practically apply what they're learning. Because the pyramid model is a relationship-based coaching model, collaboration is built in, and it ties back to everything we've talked about regarding relationships with mentees. So you can relate this part of environmental supports to your teachers understanding developmentally appropriate practices and using them in their environments. Also, it's important to consider time. Think of this almost like you would routines and schedules in a classroom. Make sure you let staff know what to expect and when. Allow them adequate time to prepare for your sessions, and then conduct those sessions in the specified time constraints. Additionally, make sure that you provide supporting resources within a timely manner. And then finally, consider the space that you use to offer feedback. Is it comfortable? Does it allow for collaborative seating? And is it a confidential space? As stated before, the targeted level relates to their knowledge, skills, and abilities related to developmentally appropriate practices. So in other words, how well are they able to teach to the group needs? For example, teachers may need to use small group activities to intentionally teach and offer opportunities for children to practice positive peer interactions in a mixed-age setting. It's important for you to know what knowledge, skills, and abilities staff hold related to developmentally appropriate practice. Remember in session 1 when you facilitated activities to help staff explore their expectations or to question their views on behavior? I remember during a consultation call in that session, and also in some of the online posts, that some of you reported some aha moments that really helped staff view children and their behaviors differently during that session. And there have been a few since. Additionally, some of you commented on how it helped you have a better understanding of where staff are and gave you ideas for additional training they might need. So best practices incorporate providing structure and routines into a well-defined environment, and also how they present their lessons in relation to children's development and learning styles. So think about that. What extent are staff encouraging language development and communication? Are they intentionally setting up opportunities for children to interact positively with supports? Sometimes we see teachers separate children who engage in conflict instead of work toward building skills so they can be together successfully. And that's what we want, is for them to take time to teach those children how to resolve conflict and how to negotiate compromise and build their reciprocal play skills instead of separating them so that they don't fight. That's not helping them manage those like impulse needs or regulate their emotions. So it's not enough for us to just offer teachers materials and activities. We want them to be intentional about how they're teaching children new skills in all areas of development. And for some of them, that means that you've got to get in that classroom and show them what that looks like, and let them see you engaging with kids in that way so they can build their skills. I mentioned before that the intensive level refers to how well the mentee is able to devise and implement specific accommodations for meeting individual children's needs. This encompasses a lot of what we addressed in sessions 2 and 3. We talked about designing strategies to gather meaningful information. We described children's needs from a strength-based perspective. And then we asked you to take that information and develop a plan of support for an individual and apply observational assessment techniques to evaluate the effectiveness of that support. And one comment during a call about how difficult it was to actually write strength-based summaries, even though it seems really easy to talk about them. And that was a great insight for that person that, wow, I understand this, but when it came down to really writing that strength-based description, I struggled. So if you're struggling with that, it's likely going to be even more difficult for staff. And so that's a place to spend some extra time if that's an area where they struggle to really hone in their skills for recognizing strength-based, but then reporting information or documenting information about those children and youth using that same strength-based perspective. There are some resources available for you in the Online Learning Center, and a lot of them are in the Free Inclusion Resources tab. One of those is the case-by-case checklist, and this just reminds you and your mentees what information is necessary to gather to be able to fully support children who might be struggling. And it includes what are their strengths and interests, what are areas of support, what are the things that might be difficult for them. It also asks about accommodations or things that might help the child. And it asks about communication support, whether or not they are using words as their primary way to communicate, or is there augmentative technology that they use, whatever it is. And it also asks about medical needs, because sometimes that contributes to how well a child is engaging in the classroom. So I encourage you to use a case-by-case checklist just to make sure you're asking for all the right information. We also need to talk about best inclusive practices. That's using the information that you get from staff and family and also from the child or youth so that you can make adjustments in the environment or in the activities and support children and youth to be successful. It also talks about how the child communicates and incorporates their communication needs into daily routines. I meet kids a lot of times who have words and they can use words, but when they get to a place where they're struggling with emotions, their capacity for using language is less. It lessens greatly. And I meet a lot of kids who, in these situations, their communication is a lot more sensory-based or movement-based. And looking at that and remembering back when we started talking about behaviors communication. And so it's important as a part of best inclusive practice to remember that and help identify when children are struggling, what are they communicating to us and what's their primary way of doing that. And we need to help staff recognize that also. We've also got to look at how to address a child's engagement in program activities with staff and peers. I still get a lot of times, oh, she prefers to play by herself. She does really good by herself. And while that's good, we want her to be able to play with peers. So, like, what opportunities are we setting up for her to practice skills so that she's more engaged with a peer and then maybe with two peers? And then we want to build her up so she can be successful in a small group activity and eventually at some level in the large group activities. So it's not enough just to recognize, oh, she's awesome on her own. We want to pull her in and help her be awesome in other ways as well. And so helping staff recognize that and create opportunities to teach children those skills. So it's important, I think, for all of us to be curious about what is interfering with the child's success and then being creative in overcoming those challenges. And I think it's probably more difficult sometimes for teachers who are in the classroom every day to remain in a curious place of, why is this hard for him? Why can't he be more successful with this? Instead of coming from a place of curiosity, sometimes they flip and it's out of frustration. Why is this so hard? And we want to really help them maintain that level of curiosity as they explore. Oh, there are a couple of comments. It looks like, Christine, you guys are using the case-by-case checklist and love it. And then Summer, you guys are also using it for the probing questions during full MIAD. So that's awesome to see. I'm glad you guys are already using that tool. So let's do a quick learning check. What I'd like you to do is we're going to review how the pyramid applies in the coaching model. So in the chat box, I'd like you to type the number of the level. 1 is intensive, down to 4 for foundational. And then next to it, type the letter of the definition that matches it. So you've got A, B, C, D on the left and 1, 2, 3, 4 on the right. Match those numbers with the letters and type that in the chat box for me, please. For example, you could put 5F if those two were on there and matched. Okay, we have a few coming in. I'm going to let a few more people enter into the chat box before we review it. Okay. Everything that's come in so far is correct. So 1B, implementing strategies and making accommodations to meet a child's needs, absolutely intensive supports. And that matches to the pyramid as we use it for supporting children in the classroom. And 2A, understanding of group needs and the ability to teach to improve developmental skills is a targeted support. We ask them in the classroom to teach pro-social skills, practice communication, those kinds of things, and sometimes it takes small group to do that. 3D, provide enabling conditions and context that will maximize efforts. So that's true. We want to create those environments that support learning and support success. And so that leaves foundational supports for C, establishing positive, trusting relationships. Nice work. Thank you guys for doing that. Okay, this might be my favorite slide in this whole presentation. I love that the airplane is flying over the pyramid. So in the E module, we specified that the coaching process begins with a collaborative agreement between the coach and the person being coached, and that is to determine goals and create an action plan. And it's important to look at outcomes or changes in knowledge and skill as a part of that process, and then if you need to, making some adjustments for their learning styles or for their confidence. Outcomes help us know when goals are achieved, and that's how staff can show you that they understand the plan and that they can apply it, that they can actually do this. So the collaborative agreement between the coach and mentee sets those guidelines and goals for the relationship. So you are going to outline each person's responsibilities, expected contributions, and each person's commitment to their role. For example, as a coach, you may agree to maintain confidentiality, to learn about the mentee and their skills, and use a variety of tools to support them. Also observe objectively and offer guidance to address emerging skills and to adjust coaching to the unique learning style of that mentee. And then we're going to ask the mentee to agree on building positive relationships with children and families and colleagues. We're going to ask them to design supportive environments and to learn strategies to support children's success, maintain developmentally appropriate practices, and to fully engage in the coaching process. And you should also agree on how you'll communicate with one another and what the timing is going to be for presenting new information. Your coaching sessions and feedback sessions need to be at times that are meaningful for that staff person. And the mentee needs to know what they can expect from you, and understanding that the coaching sessions will be separate from the routine observations that you conduct in the classroom, although you'll still be able to use that time to contribute to the coaching process. So I think sometimes we're good about letting staff know what we're going to do for them, but we don't always take time to find out what they need from us, from their perspective. And so that's part of the importance of creating this collaborative agreement, is finding out what is it that they need for us, what's important to them, and when they want to engage with them. So I want to think back to session 2 when we talked about the IDP, the airplane, where the people are in the hangar, on the runway, they're taking off or in the air. Where are staff in that process? So this can help you come up with appropriate goals and give you the insight into where to start. You may have 3 staff in one classroom who you're working with, but if they're at different levels in this IDP, then the goals that you agree to with them as individuals for coaching might be different. And so there might be times where you have an action plan for each individual and also a classroom action plan for increasing structure or whatever in the classroom. But it's really important to understand where they are and meet them where they are to get started. And it's also important to understand where their skills fall in relation to the pyramid of support. If you're working with a mentee who's not established positive relationships with children, then you have to start there. If their interactions are good and they offer a supportive, structured environment that meets the needs of most of the children in their care, then you're going to be looking at skills related to targeted level of teaching, communication, coping skills, self-help, and social skills. And you might also need to help them develop skills related to positive behavior supports or those objective observation skills. And, of course, strengths-based observations and documentation. Once you figure out where to start, then you have to figure out what resources you need so that you can introduce the knowledge and show them how to implement it. Watch them apply new knowledge and skills, and then offer feedback. So resources that should be readily available for you include some of your branch-specific modules, creative curriculum for a lot of you. For many of you, MFLAC or EFMP offer resources that you can access, and also ACS. You may have access to expert teachers, colleagues, various online resources such as Conscious Discipline or CEPHL, and then, of course, KIT. Those of you in middle school or teens have access to the Boys and Girls Clubs of America and their online resources, and KIT is a partner with them, so we've actually created some of their curriculum specific to inclusion. So problem solving comes into play when you and your mentee do not agree on specified goals or how they'll be implemented. And this sometimes comes up as you get started in the process. How are you going to handle it if the mentee did not view a webinar prior to your meeting? If you'd asked them to watch maybe a webinar on biting or on de-escalating behavior or something like that, and they didn't view it before your scheduled meeting? Or what about if the mentee doesn't implement the agreed upon strategies? We agreed on these and you're not doing it. How do you handle that? And this is where your relationship with the mentee can really pay off. If they trust you, then this can be a really honest conversation that helps you understand each other's perspectives and come to an agreement. So we're going to talk about this a little more, but remember, it's also an important part of that relationship is when you come to them, if they're not meeting your expectations, still try to use that strength-based perspective and be curious with them instead of frustrated with them. Like, manage your frustration before the meeting and have this conversation to figure out why are they stuck in this process. So part of the shared goals and action planning is identifying where you're going to start. And often there are a variety of things to work on, but you have to work together to figure out where you're going to start. So you have the pyramid model to help and understanding that positive relationships are the foundation, and then you move up from there. But you also have to consider what is their knowledge, experience, and interest. What goals do they want to work on? So what do you do if there's a disagreement in where they need to start? So the first step is to lay out what the problem is. Listen to what the teacher indicates is their greatest goal and why. Validate their feelings and recognize their intention toward improvement in the classroom. And then find out why do they rank it as their top priority. And then share what your greatest goal and reasoning is for starting with that. And talk about what is the impact or the challenge in having overall in that program. Like, how is it impacting the program, and why do you rank it as top priority? And then you're going to discuss assessment data to revisit strengths and challenges in the classroom or the group and align it with the pyramid model. So share your insights and listen to the teachers, and then see if you can agree on priorities and write the goal. If you're unable to agree on a specific goal, can you compromise? For success, it's important that the mentee agrees with the goal and that they have an opportunity to contribute. So another thing might be to look at, is it possible to blend goals together so that it meets both of your priorities? let's look at a scenario and see if we can come up with a resolution. So you've observed Mr. Rubin in the program, and he consistently uses a loud voice to communicate with children and sometimes uses sarcasm. You would like the coaching goal to be Mr. Rubin consistently using conversational tones with children. Mr. Rubin wants to focus on planning structured activities for the playground. How do you come to an agreement on the coaching goal? So please read 1 through 3 and select which of those you think can help you come to an agreement with Mr. Rubin. Okay, I feel like that was kind of a give-me answer. Everybody's getting that. 3 is that review the information related to strengths and challenges in the classroom and come to an agreement about the greatest priority and which goal will address that challenge. Compromise if necessary. Does anybody have an idea what a compromise might be on this? Do you feel like this could be one you could blend pretty easily or not? Because I totally get why Mr. Rubin might want playground structure to be different. And I also get why we want the voice to be lower, because teacher noise in a classroom contributes to child noise. Christine, I agree. You could totally do both. I think it would be fairly easy to come to a compromise in this. There might be other situations where we can't. And I think you have to be careful about how, because the voice thing is totally about Mr. Rubin, but it's so important. I work with people often who have big voices. All right, let's move on. Coaching and outcomes. So we've talked about the collaborative agreement, talked about an action plan. Now we're going to talk about outcomes and effectiveness of coaching. In the coaching process, we're looking at performance outcomes to know when goals are achieved. And performance is that application of knowledge to practice. So we're not talking about performance related to supervisory goals and like management expectations, not a personnel thing, but performance in that they have the knowledge and they can use the knowledge in the classroom to support children or to manage group needs. So this is where they show you that they really understand the information and they can apply it. There are a lot of ways to do this. So I'm going to talk about just 3 today. And just a reminder, this isn't about just their performance, but it's also about your performance too, because a piece of it is how we support others is what allows them to be successful. So this is kind of a team approach and outcome. And sometimes you'll have to make adjustments in how you're teaching and coaching so that the outcomes are achieved. So visual confirmation is following training, modeling, and feedback. You're able to determine effectiveness by observing them using the skills they were taught in the classroom or the group according to their action plan. So for example, if the goal is to reduce directives and offer conditional choices, using conversational tones to assist a child to successfully follow class routines. An example of that is prior to snack, Samantha continued to play with the soft toy while other children were washing their hands and moving to the table. Mr. Deontay walked over to Samantha and quietly said, "Sam, it's time for snack. Do you want to wash your hands at the bulldozer sink or at the butterfly sink?" And in this scenario, there's a picture above each sink. And Samantha responded, "Butterfly sink." And Mr. Deontay helped her put the soft toy away and walked with her to the sink. So that's giving a conditional choice. Additionally, you can observe if the outcome of using strategies are achieved. For example, if you have a goal to use individual cues to help a child prepare for transitions and to reduce the number of tantrums in a week, then you can view staff using those one-on-one cues and track the number of tantrums to look for a reduction throughout the week. So social ownership is, we're going to ask them to demonstrate social ownership when they're not only using the strategies and skills, but they're able to teach them to others. For example, in the scenario we just discussed, Mr. Deonte talks to Ms. V about conditional choices and then asks her to watch him use the strategy with the child. He approaches a child who struggles at nap time and said, "Robbie, it's rest time. Would you like to do a puzzle at the small table while I help your friends get to their cots? Or are you ready to take a book to your cot?" Robbie asked to do Magnus House at the small table. Mr. Deonte agreed and limited the amount he could use and reminded him that when everyone else was on their cots, he would let Robbie know and read with him at his cot. He then returned to Miss V and explained how supporting Robbie with choices helped the entire class transition more easily to rest time. Now, this is one of those times where staff might make a statement to the effect of, "That's not fair. Everybody else is going to want to." But you go back to, this is what Robbie needs to be successful, and it's easier to give him a way to manage himself while you help other kids get to their cots than have that battle during the entire transition that impacts everybody's transition to the cot. So we have a webinar. I don't remember what it's called, but there is a webinar about fairness. I'll try to email it out after if I can find the name of that. So skill assessment involves creating a visual assessment of skills prior to and following coaching. So the snapshots can offer a clear picture of application of strategies or improvement in skills. So if you think about the support strategy assessment that we used in session 3, you could use a similar assessment before and after coaching to assess effectiveness. The contributing factors assessment is also found at the Online Learning Center and the free inclusion resources, and it's often really helpful in these situations. It's similar to the tool you used last session, but it has a little more information in it. And there are a number of other skills assessments that you can use that align with your practices, such as the assessments from CEFL. I think TS Gold has some assessments. So the importance is to remember that we're focusing on outcomes. And so similar to writing a support plan for children, this is an action plan for staff to develop the skills they need to support all children. So you have to figure out what objective method you can use to assess their skills as you develop the action plan, and then again to measure outcomes for their application or demonstration of skills. So please review the action plan on the slide, and then using the chat box, describe what criteria you would use to indicate that the goal has been achieved. So our goal is that Miss Ann will have all of her materials ready, including individual supports for Oscar. They will be prepped and easily accessible prior to transition from free play to group time. And those include a visual cue for Oscar and a chair that has a kick strap on it that are placed near the carpet. There will be a planned movement activity to greet children as they arrive to carpet. The book for the story will be chosen and nearby, and there are support objects for a short learning activity. So the expected outcome is that after children finish cleaning up from free play, they'll move to the carpet, and Miss Ann will begin an engaging movement activity. The support teacher will show Oscar his visual cue, movement first, then sit, and assist him to the carpet for movement. Once the majority of children are on the carpet, Miss Ann will show Oscar his sit picture to help him to his chair, and then begin an engaging story. So they're going to be engaged in movement until most of them get there. Then they're going to transition to the story, and Miss Ann will then engage into a learning activity. So we expect that children will be attentive and engaged without redirection from teachers and too much focus on sitting crisscross applesauce. So the focus is on engagement without that redirection. And we expect the support teacher to meet the individual needs within the group while Miss Ann facilitates the group. So thinking about that, describe what criteria you'll use to indicate that that goal has been achieved. And I'll give you a little bit of time for this. Okay, so we have a couple of responses, and one of them is through observation, we can see that goals were met. Each person had an assigned role and followed through. So if you saw them do those steps by observation, you would know it. And so that would indicate that they had that prepared routine and support materials were available already, and that the teachers in the room knew exactly what their roles were. And another one is the goal would be achieved once children transitioned from movement to the carpet, and Oscar transitioned from movement to his chair with or without his support. And that's true, but we have to know how we're going to measure that. And one of the things that sometimes happens is when children start being successful, sometimes we get a little less intentional about keeping some of the structure in place, and over time it starts falling to pieces again. So making sure if they're fading out the support that we don't see a regression in behavior. So I absolutely agree that it's looking at if the children, the group, and the individual children are successful and what was done to make them successful. So again, observations, I think, help with that. Then here's one, looking at lesson plans prior to the observation to see if it's actually part of the written activity plan, and are the materials available before the activity is going to happen. looking for observations throughout the week, and then looking ahead in the weeks to come. Christine said it's the fade out that gets us in trouble every time. So you have to think about what is it about that support that helps a child be successful. I was struggling to read for a while because my eyes were going bad. So first I got the little cheater readers, and now I have a lovely transitional glasses. If I don't have those, then I regress back to struggling to read. So if it's something like that, if it's because that support is what helps the child be successful, like having the chair with the kick strap in place helps Oscar, but if he has to find his own chair, he can't. That's really important. But I've had kids sometimes, one little guy I worked with, we used a picture schedule to help him transition into summer camp. And they had the exact same routine every morning, and then it got into more choices. He needed it for like 2 or 3 days, and that was it. He just needed to learn it, and once he learned it, he was good, so he didn't need the picture schedule anymore. But other kids in his group were like, hey, where's our picture schedule? So they really liked it. He didn't need it. So it's thinking about things like that and being aware. Any other ideas on how you would objectively measure whether outcomes were being met in the classroom? All right. So let's review. We've talked about using the pyramid to structure coaching, and remember, it starts with your relationship with staff, and it moves up to creating supportive environments for learning, assisting them to increase their knowledge, skills, and abilities for developmentally appropriate practices, and then working with them to create accommodations to meet the more specific needs of children, youth, and programs. And you may have to create specific supports for them to learn also. And I've been in programs sometimes where the trainers get really frustrated with staff, and I hear things like, well, we gave them the plan, but sometimes handing them the plan isn't enough because they just can't figure out how do I make it work in this environment with these kids, and they really do need our support along that. And remember, once you establish those relationships, then you start working on that collaborative agreement and set the goals for the action plan and identify with them what your role is and what their role is to achieve those goals, and make adjustments in the action plan as you need to reach those outcomes. And think about the action activities that you've done through this session, and you still have one more for this session, and how they help create this agreement, or how do they support you to use effective coaching techniques and support learning. So consider the resources available to you, the questions we've asked you to address, and are you ready? Do you know what skills you need to work on to increase your effectiveness? Where are you on the IDP for coaching and mentoring? I know from working with a lot of you that you're definitely in the air, but are there areas of turbulence that you need to address so that you have a smoother flight? I appreciate your dedication and the effort that you put into this course. Heather and I both have really enjoyed our cohorts. I hope you're able to create plans so that you can implement the strategies that we've discussed over these past several months and use them in your day-to-day working lives. So let's talk about next steps. Consider the key elements in coaching: building relationships, supporting development of specific skills and practices, creating shared goals, active listening, observation, modeling, and feedback to support staff. And identify one of the key elements of coaching that's difficult for you to translate into practice, and offer a solution for implementing the key element in your daily work. The action activities available, it's called Maximizing Coaching, and my online form is open. I think Heather opened hers before she left, but if somebody in that cohort, if it's not open, if you'll send an email to jana@kit.org, then I will make sure we get that open for you, but I think she did that before she left. Are there any comments or questions? Christine, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. It's been helpful for you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Amanda for our finish.
Great. Thank you, Janet. And thank you again, everyone, for all your participation. This was a webinar that required a lot of good chat participation, so we're glad that you guys were there with us actively engaging. And I'm going to go ahead and give everyone a few minutes to post any questions that they may have for Janet. So if you do have any questions, you can type them into the chat box on the left side of your screen, and we will answer as many as we can with the time that we have left. But any that we don't get to right now, we'll be sure to answer later on via email. And if anyone is watching this recording, you can email your questions to your course instructor, and they'll give you a response. Okay, let's go ahead and see what's coming up here. While I'm waiting for any other lingering questions to come in, I do want to follow up again and just say we appreciate you guys staying in touch with us, and we hope to stay in touch with you beyond this course's completion through Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest, as well as our online learning center and the other great online resources we have available. Great. Thank you. Thank you all so much. We see the great feedback coming in. We really appreciate that feedback and are glad that you found this course beneficial.
And also I'd like to remind you to look for an email coming out from your coaches. You have another opportunity for a phone consultation if you'd like to take them up. And even when the class is over, please feel free to email Heather or myself if you need support in this. We really want to support you guys to be successful in putting all of these new skills into practice.
Awesome. Thank you, Janet. And it doesn't look like we have any questions coming in, so I'll go ahead and wrap it up. We appreciate you guys so much and appreciate the time that you took out of your day to join us today. And we look forward to continuing finishing this course with you. But again, please let us know if there's anything we can do to support you along the way. And thank you, Janet, and we look forward to working with you guys soon. Have a great day, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone.